Ladies and gentlemen, it finally happened. The moment Democrats swore would never come to pass just did. Chuck Schumer's political stunt, his so-called shutdown strategy, has officially blown up in his face. President Donald J. Trump just flipped the switch and he unleashed what insiders are calling the shutdown slasher. Billions in blue state funding gone, pet projects, pork programs, climate schemes, union kickbacks, wiped clean off the federal ledger, guys. And the very same Democrats who thought that they could choke Trump into surrendering, they're the ones that are gasping for air right now. So while Chuck Schumer hides behind the podium pretending to negotiate, Trump's already moving pieces on a completely different chessboard. He's cutting off the deep state cash flow, using the shutdown to do what no Republican president in modern history has dared to do: take the knife straight to the bureaucracy itself. Now, here's the twist nobody saw coming, okay? The polling, the panic, and the backroom revolts prove it. It proves it all. The longer the government stays dark, the brighter Trump's numbers get. Democrats are in free fall. Even CNN cannot spin this one. So tonight, we're going to break down exactly how Chuck Schumer's shutdown backfired spectacularly, how Trump weaponized it in a red state victory, and why this moment right here today may go down as the turning point of his second term. Because make no mistake, this is not just a shutdown. This is Trump unleashed. Hit the like button, subscribe. Let's get into it. So Chuck Schumer thought he was playing chess, but he forgot Donald J. Trump was playing demolition. So when the shutdown began, Chuck Schumer refused to even allow a vote on the same continuing resolution that he proudly supported just a few months ago. Why? Why did he change his mind? Well, because Democrats believed that they could force Trump's hand. They thought that they could bleed him politically and make the headlines scream that Republicans are to blame for the shutdown. And of course, in turn, the next election into a referendum on chaos. Well, this was their plan. It was a calculated stunt. It was built on the old belief that the mainstream media would carry their water. Now, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they were all ready to push the narrative that Trump was reckless and cruel. But here's the big mistake. Chuck Schumer misread the country. He assumed that Americans were still living back in 2018, even though it's 2025, when the media could basically script reality. But instead, after 3 weeks of shutdown theater, Democrats found themselves cornered. Look at Hakeem Jeffries, Walmart Obama, Temu Obama, right? Government agencies paused while the White House didn't blink. The polls began to twitch, then they began to swing. Inside the Capitol, whispers started leaking. We might have overplayed this. Chuck Schumer bet everything on the public blaming Trump, and he lost that bet. And so that was the very first crack. This was the moment that the so-called master strategist realized that he had built his narrative on quicksand. Then, of course, came the backfire. Loud, humiliating, and impossible to ignore. New polling out of CNN and Harvard-Harris showed the unthinkable. Trump's approval rating rising during the shutdown. Rising, guys. His blame numbers are down 13 points from the last shutdown, okay? And all of a sudden, Chuck Schumer's grand narrative that this was all Trump's fault shattered on live TV. Voters weren't buying the sob stories anymore. They saw right through the act. They remembered 2018. They remembered who weaponized shutdowns back then. And this time they said, enough. A New York Times survey found nearly 2/3 of Americans, including half of Democrats, their own people, their own supporters, wanted the government reopened now. Drop a now if you want the government reopened. I mean, look at what's happening at the airports and at the DMVs, and it's incredible, guys. So the same poll showed independents turning away from Schumer in droves. That's when panic set in. Democrats had chained themselves to a sinking ship, and the media's megaphone couldn't stop the water from pouring in. Even liberal pundits started whispering the words that they never wanted to say out loud. The public's on Trump's side. So the moment that data hit Capitol Hill, the strategy shifted from how long can we hold out to how fast can we get out before the damage is permanent. Now, the standard has clearly shifted. It used to be pretty rare for people to review their Medicare plan, but now it's the rule, not the exception. This is why I partner with Chapter. They've made reviewing Medicare coverage a normal part of retirement planning. One of our viewers, she said, I thought I was late, but then I found out most of my friends had already called Chapter. So let me ask, Are you going to stay behind the curve? Or are you going to do what most people already are and catching up? Now, most people, they're already dialing that phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. That phone number again is 909-563-8279. Look, Medicare premiums are set to skyrocket next year, and many Medicare Advantage plans, they're disappearing altogether. So don't wait till the last minute. Call right now. Get this off your plate. That way you can actually enjoy the fall and the holiday season without Medicare stress hanging over your head. So while Chuck Schumer scrambled to explain away the collapsing polls, President Trump, he was already executing what insiders are now calling the shutdown slasher playbook. You see, guys, Trump doesn't just use pressure. He weaponizes it, okay? He's a lot smarter than Chuck Schumer, I'll tell you that right now. Instead of viewing the shutdown as a crisis, he saw opportunity. Every frozen dollar, every paused program, every unfunded bureaucracy, it became a target. And this time, he wasn't bluffing. In fact, Trump warned earlier on that certain programs would face irreversible cuts if Democrats refused to negotiate. And well, clearly he meant it. Time magazine even noted that Trump's team was actively identifying blue state projects to trim, redirect, or cancel altogether. Infrastructure funds for Chuck Schumer's own New York district, gone. Energy subsidies for California's green fantasies, slashed. The message was very simple. You play games with the budget, you pay for it at home. It's as simple as that. And the brilliance of it, Trump turned an impasse into a tool of reform. So while Schumer was stuck performing for the cameras, Trump was out there rewriting the fiscal playbook in real time. So for the first time in decades, a Republican president used a shutdown not to surrender and give up, but to reshape government itself. That's not gridlock. That is controlled demolition, and Trump's holding the detonator in his hand. Now, once Trump's shutdown slasher plan went full operational, the results hit like a political earthquake. Billions in blue state pork erased. Chuck Schumer's long-cherished Hudson Valley Infrastructure Fund terminated. Federal grants for California's hydrogen hub project frozen. Green tech subsidies, art councils, climate research stipends, all of a sudden under review. It wasn't chaos. This was strategy. Trump's budget director, Russ Vought, he explained it bluntly. Why should taxpayers in Texas and Florida bankroll the failed spending sprees of New York and California? That doesn't make any sense. This is when the shift became visible. Look, red states, they weren't just surviving the shutdown, they were winning it. In fact, highway maintenance funds, agricultural contracts, and manufacturing initiatives, they continued flowing into conservative heartlands. Now, for Democrats, this was a complete nightmare. The very shutdown they created to hurt Trump ended up pushing their own donors, their own cities, their own bureaucracies. Guys, the optics couldn't be any worse for Democrats right now. In fact, it actually looked like Trump had taken their favorite toy, the federal money, and turned it into a weapon. Chuck Schumer's coalition began to fracture. Whispers started to panic because deep down they already knew. Every extra day the government stayed closed was another Democrat program on the chopping block. Boom. Boom, like a thunderclap. Then, when Democrats thought that they could spin their way out of this disaster, the media made it worse. Fact checkers rushed to save Schumer and ended up humiliating themselves. So when conservative news outlets began reporting that part of the shutdown fight was about Democrats trying to expand healthcare subsidies to illegal immigrants, the corporate press went into full denial mode. False, they screamed. Misleading, they wrote, right? But here's the kicker. They were caught cherry-picking definitions, ignoring parolees and so-called temporary status migrants who still qualified under hidden clauses. Daily Caller tore through their lies line by line, showing that the fact checkers' own sources proved Republicans right. The story wasn't about Trump being heartless. It was about Democrats hijacking the budget to quietly fund policies that voters never even approved to begin with. And the media, instead of investigating, they acted like the defense attorneys for the DNC. It was unbelievable. The result? Americans stopped believing them. Every denial only confirmed the suspicion that press was purely covering for corruption. Then, and when the truth started trending online faster than CNN could censor it, the credibility of legacy media collapsed right alongside Chuck Schumer's strategy. So then came the No Kings Circus. This was one of the biggest self-own of the entire shutdown, okay? They owned themselves. Democrats delayed reopening the government just to fuel these ridiculous street rallies, recruiting Antifa members, shouting that Trump was behaving like a dictator. But think about that for a second. If Trump were actually a dictator, would you even be allowed to protest him? Like, their whole theory has nothing to stand on. The whole premise exploded on contact with reality. Footage poured in of these tiny crowds, people holding signs about climate change, immigration, and TikTok bans, everything except the shutdown. By mid-afternoon, most of the rallies had completely fizzled out. Chuck Schumer himself took to the stage in D.C., rambling before a crowd that barely filled up one city block. Not once did he defend his own shutdown plan. Not once did he mention the pain that it was causing his own constituents. It was purely political theater at its worst. Empty slogans, replacing strategy, and the irony? The more they screamed, "No Kings," the more Trump looked like the only man in Washington who was still in control. So now, while Chuck Schumer was performing for the cameras, the real-world impact of his gamble that blew up in his face started hitting home. Thousands of federal workers across blue state strongholds, they were suddenly furloughed. Offices went dark, paychecks frozen, and one of the biggest shockwaves came from inside the national security world. Politico reported that the National Nuclear Security Administration had to furlough most of its civilian staff. That's right, guys. The agency responsible for maintaining America's nuclear stockpile sent home its workforce because of Chuck Schumer's stunt. Trump's team wasted no time framing it exactly as it was: reckless, dangerous, and politically suicidal. His press secretary reminded Americans that Democrats were holding national defense hostage over social programs for illegal migrants. It was no longer Trump's shutdown. It was Schumer's security risk. Then, while legacy media scrambled to try to blame gridlock, average Americans already saw what was already happening. A president trying to protect the country and a Senate majority leader or Senate minority leader who was willing to gamble with its safety. In living rooms across the nation, one question started echoing. What kind of leader shuts down his own country to make a political point, right? This is when even Democrats started whispering the unthinkable. It was time to back down. And that's when it happened, guys. The cracks in the wall became visible. Moderate Democrats, especially those who are up for re-election in 2026, they began peeling off. Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire broke first, calling for an immediate vote to reopen the government. Then came whispers from John Tester, Joe Manchin's allies, even staffers from Pennsylvania and Nevada. They had seen the same polling. Trump was surging. Schumer was shrinking and sinking. So inside this caucus, panic meetings turned into shouting matches. "We can't hold the line forever." This is what one of their aides leaked out, right? But the truth was out. It was already out. Chuck Schumer had no plan, he had no exit, and he had no leverage left. And then when the realization hit, the term Schumer's surrender started trending on X. Republicans seized the narrative overnight. This is what strength looks like. Trump posted, "No more caving, no more fake compromises." Even conservative outlets began describing it as a psychological turning point. The moment Democrats stopped fighting Trump and started begging for an off-ramp, the once mighty Senate majority leader who dreamed of breaking Trump's will, it was now the one that was blinking first, and the world was watching him fold. Now, for decades, Democrats could always count on one weapon: the corporate press. CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they could pretty much twist any crisis into a win for the left. But that era is over. The shutdown didn't just expose Chuck Schumer's weakness, it exposed the media's collapse. Trump didn't need them anymore. He went straight to the people. X posts, Truth Social, live streams, direct briefings, bypassing the legacy gatekeepers entirely. And for the first time, Americans weren't getting their opinions from the talking heads in DC. They were getting them from each other. Independent journalists, YouTubers, and citizen fact checkers dismantled the mainstream narrative in real time. Polls flipped because the public stopped buying the scripted outrage. This is what scholars now call the network society. Information democratized, power decentralized. And it's devastating for the whole system. I mean, because when the truth spreads without a filter, propaganda dies real fast. You know what I'm saying here? Chuck Schumer's old playbook relied on control, but Trump's America runs on connection. Millions of people fact-checking the government and media live every hour of every day. And so that shift right there, it didn't just change the shutdown, it changed who controls reality. So where does it go from here? Well, Chuck Schumer's surrender isn't just political, it's structural. So when this shutdown finally ends, eventually, America will look different. Billions once funneled into these blue state bureaucracies, they're going to be redirected into infrastructure, border security, and manufacturing hubs across red America. The programs that Democrats thought were permanent, they're gone. Their green deals, their DEI departments, their activist grants, cut, frozen, or even dismantled. Trump has already signaled what comes next: a leaner federal government, a stronger private economy, and a hard line on spending accountability. Now, here's a twist. Voters want it. Polls show a majority now support Trump's decision to hold firm. The left's great shutdown experiment backfired so badly that it accelerated what they feared the most: the rise of a new conservative era. And in that era, Washington's no longer dictating the narrative. The people do. So as Chuck Schumer's power fades and Trump's victory cements, I want you to remember this, okay? They called it chaos. Trump called it strategy. And history will call it the turning point. Like, subscribe, and tell me below, do you think Trump should keep the government closed until every corrupt program is gone for good? Let me know. See you next time.